Hi all and welcome to the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams and this is March 19th. As always, this show will tell you what you need to hear, not what you want to hear. We've had enough BS, particularly over the last month, and we're going to get back to reality. To this show hosts and guests who have been on my show and have walked away, I thank you for engaging me on our journey. Now is the time, or your time, to leave, I guess. One had always hoped we would join forces together in a more permanent action, but it was not to be. And so I will go forward with people who are ready, and we will walk the lonely path. I will not walk in front of them. I will continue to walk beside them. I will not shrink or bow to fake pressures and lies. I will not compromise myself like you have, and I will not be selling out due to threats, harassment or abuse either. I will not be seduced by money, titles or fame. I will be what I have always been, me. People will always make their own choices, what they think of me. That is not my concern. What I think of me is, I know who I am, what I stand for, what are my strengths and what are my weaknesses. And my weaknesses, as pointed out to me by several people, is that I'm too loyal and give people too many chances. But that is their problem and weakness, not mine. That is and comes from real self-mastery, as so many spend their lives doubting themselves, never mind others. Self-mastery changes all that. I have walked the lonely path all of my life, as doubters of me, my input or narrative were always prevalent in every stage of this lifetime. So this is nothing new to me. I take inner strength from it. It drives me on. It pushes me to greater heights as I inner challenge myself to do and work better, and it has served me well. Inner weak people are those who flip-flop on their opinions and their associates around them. Now people can see them for what they currently stand for. With masks removed, all of their words appear hollow and shallow like the bottom of a barrel. That scraping sound just got a whole lot louder, as dark as the void, and I wish them well in their new surroundings. Now some people may complain at times we focus on these doubters a bit too much, and that's a fair point. But you're missing a key factor. Whilst it may be in opening pieces or the op-ed section of our show, in amongst it is the intel and the proof of what we are doing here is on the right path. And the point to remember is Shane Bales is a Rothschild. We are hurting the Rothschild clan badly. So they send out their minions. Is that not intel and proof in and of itself? And when you come to realise that over 90% of the alt media are being operated by clowns, you will realise why there is so much BS and failed predictions. With everything else on lockdown or in lockdown, shut down or scale back mode, we have armed guards protecting toilet paper. Biden wants a female vice president, so I guess that rules out Michael then. Toilet paper, the new gold. Hey, Cornholio, I need TP for my bunghole. CEOs flying out the door, known names all getting the virus. And we have the government denying aliens exist and then says there's a crackdown on criminal aliens in California. Non-thinking rules the air, it seems. And then there's Jennifer Haller, fake crisis actor pretending to get coronavirus live testing. The name Jennifer Haller has 50 separate profiles in LinkedIn. Popular name, it seems. Even more popular than the 16 Jimmy Brents, all living in Virginia. Oh my. I guess Langley not too original with their names, it seems. Facebook latest Ouroboros program has now failed, and it's advertising people to come back now. And we have Go Ogle playing faction games and exposing opposition by opening its search engines. It's all happening. It's full moon time every day now, as many fall to the seduction of it all. But there is one thing that continues despite the chaos, poop throwing and general lunacy. Welcome to THI. Hi all and welcome to the Truth, Honour and Integrity show. We've got a fairly packed show, a fair chunk of intel, and a few interesting pieces, including a riddle pondering piece right at the end, so I look forward to that. We will be covering some of the alt media nonsense a bit more than normal because, like I said, it's it is part of the intel and exposing who these criminal elements are working for within the alt media. But we're also going to turn it into psychological pieces, which all is reflective of us and how we react. So it's not a full-on, let's hammer this person or that. We've had enough of that. Anyway, a hotel, with the news first. Hotel has collapsed in southeastern Chinese city of Quanzhou, and they buried dozens of people under the rubble. Now, the building was reportedly being used as the quarantine site for the so-called deadly COVID-19 coronavirus, which has suddenly been renamed into SARS-CoV-2. I wonder how many noticed it. Perhaps it's Zionist in origin. They like to change the names. And footage from the scene showed the building reduced to rubble and emergency service were searching through the debris. Now, when this came out, there was 38 people had been rescued. I presume more followed. And it just crumpled. Like buildings just automatically crumple. Well, it's another distraction highlight piece, but who did it remains a mystery. And 70 people were trapped under the hotel remains, and no information on potential casualties or the cause of the collapse. This is a country that listeners should take note of, because there's a lot going on there that does fit the narrative, but there's a lot that doesn't. But take note of Saudi Arabia. Now, the Crown Prince has had all of his or some of his relatives arrested for allegedly plotting a coup against him and King Salman with the help of, quote, foreign powers, including the Americans, unquote. Now, the RT News, who covered this story, asked a Middle East analyst to weigh in, and he said 3 senior members of the Saudi royal family were arrested on Friday, and it was also reported by several Western media outlets. And the list of detainees includes Prince Ahmed bin Abdul Aziz, who is the younger brother of King Salman, Mohammed bin Nayef, the King's nephew, and the former Crown Prince Nawaf bin Nayef, who's the younger half-brother of Prince Nayef. All very Egyptian, isn't it? And the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has allegedly accused them of treason, namely conducting contacts with foreign powers, including the Americans and others, to carry out a coup d'etat against King Salman and his son. And there were further reports of high-profile arrests that have yet to be confirmed by Saudi Arabia, but they wouldn't be unprecedented. There's another story today which kind of ties in. Saudi Arabia is Bush cartel, and linked with Israel. They fund them as they're part of the same group. And Israel is making its mark on Turkey. I did warn many shows back, and it might have even been in Cosmic Voice, when I said two of the key countries would be Turkey and Japan. Well, there was a Twitter handle of the Israeli Defense Minister, Mr. Bennett, who alleged to have said it had been breached. I guess their servers are not as secure anymore, shall we say. And he sent out a highly off-message post urging the liberation of Palestine, followed by the lyrics of Turkey's anthem in English. Now, the post appeared briefly on Bennett's Twitter page on Saturday morning, whilst there is yet no confirmation of the intrusion from the minister or his office. The tweet was archived and captured in a number of screenshots before it was deleted. Now, of course, Mr. Netanyahu today is supporting Turkey's alleged attacking of Russia, of going to war with Russia. Someone needs to tell him it's not 1919 anymore. You'll get crushed, both of you. Two more suspects have been caught after the deadly Pulwama terrorist attack, which killed 40 Indian troops and spiked hostilities between India and Pakistan, including a 19-year-old bomb maker who got chemicals from Amazon. Oh dear. This is another war that is playing out that has hidden doors, shall we say. And the two men, Waiz ul Islam and Mohed Abbas Rather, were arrested by India's counter-terrorism force on Friday, alleging Islam procured bomb ingredients such as ammonium nitrate from the online retail giant Amazon. Nice place. And the teen, whose father is a government employee, is also accused of personally bringing items to the terrorist cell that carried out the attack. And Jaish-e Mohammed, for his part, is said to have harboured the militants in his home that led up to the attack, including IED builder Mohammed Umar and the suicide bomber himself, Abdul Ahmed Dar. There's a lot going on between those two countries that has gone on for many hundreds, if not thousands of years, because of a certain base there, which is not as well occupied as it was in the past. Now, the one thing that's kind of pleasing with the distraction of the coronavirus, we haven't heard from Greta Thunberg for a while. And someone in, I think it's Sweden, I may be wrong, have invented the anti-Greta label to portray her as an evil right antichrist. But it only attracted more people to her ideas. Naomi Seibert, who says the human effect on climate change is vastly exaggerated. Now, this girl, who's a young girl, I think she's only about 15 or 16, 17 maybe, has been going around counteracting Greta Thunberg's rubbish. And she calls herself a climate realist and bluntly rejects the term climate change denier, which is another label used to describe her and her supporters by the opposing side. And it implies that we are just selfish and ignorant, she said, but it's not the case. We're about being scientific skeptics and looking into more sensible ways to improve the environment, to be more in line with our values when it comes to interacting with nature. And it looks a much less radical stance than the media darling Greta Thunberg, who insists that mankind must urgently cut emissions to zero to avoid catastrophic breakdown of the climate on Earth. But Naomi countered by saying she is basically just spewing panic and telling people to change their lives entirely, and it has got nothing to do with science and skepticism anymore. And that's what's awful about it. Exactly. Well said. Israel. I wonder whether the cure will come from there. Take note. Announced this week that everyone arriving in Israel will be required to self-quarantine for 14 days to prevent the spread of the coronavirus. Benjamin Nutty Asshole says all those coming to Israel from abroad will be placed in isolation. In a video address this week, and the Israeli Interior Minister, Mr. Derry, said the measure would be effective immediately for all Israelis returning to the country, and it will apply to foreign citizens from this Thursday. And the move means that foreign arrivals will have to prove that they have adequate accommodation to be quarantined during their stay. That should prevent a load of AIPAC-led senators going there for free. I wonder, will they get quarantined? Maybe not. Rules for one and rules for another. You know, we have all this panic this week in Europe and America, which has taken over where it originated from, and people tend to forget these things. But in the past week, we've heard of all kinds of drama in Italy and France, the UK, and yet the American government, I'm not so sure it was Trump, sent 30,000 American soldiers into Europe with no masks. Perhaps that's telling. Denmark, not often we cover them, but unfortunately they're not acting in the right way either. And their parliament on Thursday unanimously passed an emergency coronavirus law which gives health authorities power to force testing, treatment and quarantine with the backing of the police. See Kyle. Now the far-reaching new law will remain in force until March 2021. Not March this year, next year, when it will expire under what is known as a sunset clause. Now, what was indicative and should be taken note here is that 179 politicians in Denmark's parliament, and yet only 97 turned up to vote on it. All very Patriot Act, that to me. And it's time for the people of Denmark to remind their government who is really in charge. The California governor, Gavin Newsom, has turned over 286 state-owned buildings and properties at no cost in order to house citizens who are sleeping on the streets. Nice move. And the properties include state-owned underdeveloped lots, fairgrounds, armories and other government buildings. And the move comes in the wake of other housing initiatives launched since Newsom took office in January last year, including deploying emergency shelters in the form of mobile homes for the homeless. And he said, let's call it what it is, a disgrace that the richest state in the richest nation is failing to properly house, heal and humanely treat so many of its own people. Now, there's a fairly rampant homelessness problem in California, and is normally attributed to a lack of low-income housing options. Well, I'm not surprised, because they deliberately pushed all the rent up, deliberately pushed all the house prices up, so only certain people with lots of money could live there. It's ethnic cleansing. I warned of it about California 6 years ago. And it's all happened. San Francisco's another one, Chicago another one, New York, it's happening there as well. You watch, like Facebook, they push all these people out, and then the Order Borders program kicks in and they realise they've chewed too much of the tail and there's nothing left, and they'll be screaming for them all to come back. You watch. Anyway, Newsom has proposed $750 million for the purpose of getting this kind of housing built and getting people in as fast as possible. And this is on top of the $1.6 billion that had already been allocated for homeless services and other projects. And the state said they would offer the properties to local governments for $1 leases, and said it had earmarked $650 million in state emergency homeless aid to build out sites. But the local governments are charged with reviewing the sites and making final decisions about housing people there. Now, the homeless rate in California is around 151,000 individuals currently, with 41,000 of those being chronically homeless over a long term. Maybe this is something that the THI California group can get involved in. Why not? Instead of it going to all their people, perhaps you can claim grants on behalf of the People's Club, and we can get started on helping the homeless in California. Here's so that was a nice story. It is another one that kind of ends the news, but we've got other pieces that I need to cover to do with THI. The word caremongering, which did not exist too much until Friday, March the 13th last week, and yet in just 3 days later, what started out as a way to help vulnerable people in Toronto has turned into a movement spreading fast across Canada, and more than 35 Facebook groups have been set up in 72 hours to serve communities in places that include Ottawa, Halifax and Annapolis County, which is in Nova Scotia, with more than 30,000 members between them. And people are joining the groups to offer help to others within their communities, particularly those who are at more risk of health complications that are related to the coronavirus. And the pandemic has led to acts of kindness around the world, from delivering soup to the elderly in the UK to an exercise class held for quarantine residents on the balconies in Spain. But in Canada, a country whose inhabitants are stereotyped in the media as kind to a fault, helping others has become an organised movement called caremongering. Well, I'm pleased with that. And it's all been driven by the social media. You know, not many people like it, or less people like it, but it can be used for the right things. And the altruism is arranged online, and the hashtags provide a permanent record of all the good happening in different communities across Canada. And I thought it was a fairly uplifting read in what is anxious times for many. Right. What is going on now is it seems me, Kim and the Trust are right over the target, and I can confirm that. And so they have increased their army of internet minions to attack. But now Scammer has failed, along with Tiny and Techo and Whiskey Drinker and Expensive Cigar Smoker, etc., etc. The latest now is where they can target or attack us is that the trust funds haven't come out. And I get that, because that is correct. But I don't recall giving a date. And it's kind of pissing in the wind allegations and hoping that some of it lands in the latrine by some to justify their own failures and wishing to step out. And I guess for some our light shines too bright. But it's also ironic are the ones who are connected to the criminal elements in the DNC accuse us of not getting the funds out, and yet some of their own people and clientele list are the exact ones preventing it. Irony, like common sense it seems, is lost on many. So because the trust funds hasn't come out, in their illogical and twisted mindsets, that means THI and me have failed. Nice try, Randy, and others. But THI nor me was not built on the basis of the trust funds arriving or not. And had they listened closely to our shows, they would not lower themselves to that conclusion. But the gist of what is going on now is, and what they're trying to do is make out the trust and or Kim is fake or a scam, yet provide no proof. And then combine it with THI due to links with the trust. So in their heads, by making out the trust is fake or a scam, it discredits all of the THI information as fake or BS. This is how they work. Now the THI information has done a lot of damage in their world, a lot of damage. We have exposed many, including the hidden hand, and that makes us probably the most dangerous show on the planet to them. Hence their bizarre, proofless attacks. The THI info is now making mainstream media news on a regular basis now. You're all seeing that for yourself. And they can't handle the light being shown on their own criminality that remained hidden for so long. Now, as pointed out in a few recent Zoom calls, what either the trust funds or the $1 or more program are about is not money. It's not about creating wealth, personal or otherwise. It is a teaching program of how to change life on all levels, how to be, how to not be, learning lessons from the dark and doing the opposite, learning the failures of the old system and not replicating it, stepping away from their programs of mind control, drugs, alcohol, pharma drugs, comparative and competitive mindsets, need not greed, and thinking different. So THI and ultimately the People's Club is a rollout of a new teaching course. We have to teach a new way. The old way has failed us all on all levels now. Even the bot-like masses can see or sense it. But with recent dropping out of more alt-media characters finally showing their true colours, perhaps my prediction of a few years ago of 90% of the alt-media being corrupt now suddenly doesn't look as far-fetched, does it? Like I said, time always tells. Now the state groups are basically for people themselves to become their own teachers and chart their own path in a better way. But although we have had and seen some great progress within the groups, others are still mired in their programming, largely based on them wanting to control it. This is not what we're about. No one wants to control anything. Do I want to control it? Well, some say I have, but clearly not. If I wanted to control it, I would not have created those groups for you all to run. It was all set up with a few guidelines and a new vision for the betterment of humanity to follow. And if it was all about me, why was Randy Morgan's and Alan James given the same status? Or Liam from Scotland, who's been coming around your Zoom calls, which we've got another one with American and Canadian listeners only, please, this Saturday, somewhere around 3 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, I think. Memory serves me correctly. So look forward to that. And he is teaching about the cooperative model working in action, and how to take over failing companies and run them a better way, or how to treat and look after staff within the organisation. Why have I asked Alan, Mark, Liam and Lawrence to come up with business ideas, solutions and a working model for Alan to do a show on? Alan will do part 3. Is going to go on the People's Club website. And that doesn't involve me in any way, shape or form. Now, we've also asked Alan, Michael, Jay and some others to create a website between them that will be a standard website with all the same information, and it will be given to every state or country group upon full launch. Again, that doesn't involve me. And we've also created a charter school teaching committee, which also doesn't involve me. And we're about to set up another group based on how to obtain grants for the state and country groups. And again, that doesn't involve me. Why? Well, it's quite simple, really, because none of it's about me. This is about us all creating a blueprint for a new and better humanity that's designed to be all-inclusive. We have a lot of new members. So if you are in THI for the trust funds or just for the money, you have not understood what we are doing here at all. And I hope this piece gives you more understanding. Now, clearly those from Off-Planet Radio missed the point entirely, or told to miss the point, as the case may be. Time always tells. But THI, and eventually the People's Club, is a teaching school. You are all the teachers. Your time now is about learning, absorbing the new way, as you will all be tasked of being the teachers of the knowledge and the new ways for the current and also the future generations. Now, some people have been asking about websites and going off on their own as a state or a country, which I have asked members several times not to do that, but clearly at this point some want to make their own rules up, or so it would seem. Now, my sole reason for this is that websites and domains cost money that those in that group would have to fund, not the People's Club. And that's the sole reason. It is unnecessary time and spending, and will have to change when the funding comes out, as it will be the People's Club, not THI. And I have to say at this point, I am not approving any websites to have the TPC or the THI name or sponsoring currently. I cannot stop people, and neither do I wish to stop people going off and doing their own thing. In fact, I actually encourage it. but I cannot allow THI to be used for a vehicle for a private venture. This is our group. But if you wish to run separate to us, then that is fine by me. The TBC is my company, which is also designed to be our company. And I have the sole right to decide where my company's name is being linked to or used for. So just to be clear, go ahead, create your own groups, but do not involve THI or the TBC names. Some sent a load of stuff in to do with the Shane the Ruiner and his latest audio. I know some of you are confused by it. And no, the latest audio is not the one of him in a dress attempting to sing Lady Rothschild. Oh dear. Which I haven't listened to any of them of the Jimmy Brent. I have better things to do with my time and listen to scripted narrative that has been sent out to deliver by his own Rothschild family and the diminishing Draco brethren. The point is, he only did a second interview with his fellow agent Jimmy Brent because the first interview failed. The second fared no better either. Although I was told by people who did listen to it, it was all very mainstream media of statements and particularly with zero proof. And it's a desperate attempt to save face by a desperate group of people and entities, all to stay in control. Like I said, it's not about a mini alt media war. This goes into the bigger game, right at the top. That's why he's doing it. And the desire to stay in control at all costs. Well, the point is, only the weak wish to control others. And they are terrified of losing control. So terrified at the moment, they fail to realise they already have lost control. Which is why they send low-level puppets with Stockholm Syndrome out into the alt media to discredit people who are just trying to help humanity. Just like a puppet. Right, let's get into some sub-intel, which will carry us into the intel. It should be fun. A barrage of rockets has hit a base housing American, allegedly, and other coalition troops north of Baghdad on Saturday. And just days after a similar attack killed 3 servicemen, including 2 Americans. Well, that was the official media story. And this shows you how desperate they are now, is let's repeat history narrative. Because the last similar attempt a few months back failed. And people will have had sufficient fear porn and bullshit for them to have forgotten the previous failure at that event. If memory serves you correctly, rockets got fired at the Iraqi-American base and no one was there. No one got injured. And then suddenly the Pentagon and other clans decide to come out and say that, well, actually there was 60 or 70 Americans who've got brain damage, which didn't last. A bit like their story, really. And it's utterly pathetic. And whilst they don't like this particular next statement, I've been reliably informed, it's not me that is making you look weak, or this show. You are weak. And you do it all by yourselves. Fake stories repeated time and time again. Norwegian cruise line managers urged their sales team, it started, to share false information about the coronavirus to help land bookings with potential customers, including that the virus can't affect people in tropical temperatures. Perhaps they were telling some of the truth. And this was according to leaked emails. And the emails were first reported by Miami News Times. Really? And it shows the lengths to which the US cruise giant's leaders have gone to protect the company against devastating financial impact of the alleged pandemic. And the reason that this is in here is because here comes the finger pointing and throwing under the bus tactics, or throwing under the boat, as the case may be, neglecting the fact that these cruise liners are all linked to faction-based entities. That is why the focus in the media of cruise lines being halted. Again, there's no proof that the people on the boats actually had the virus. It's just a staged media event, and now they're throwing each other under the bus. You know, as for the media, their track record of failure is now at epic proportions, read by vacuous script-based bots, and they're thinking their opinion is more valid than anybody else. Well, it's just not. The media, social or otherwise, is a social experiment in abject failure. An illusion-based world of portal people. For those new, perhaps now people can see why I labelled them portal people, because their whole narrative is a different world than ours is why. It's a joke. See Pelosi today with toilet roll earrings. She'd be better using those earrings and stuffing them in her mouth, because she talks a lot of shit. But that's embarrassing. The third highest position in the government acting like that. The people should be up in arms at the antics of their politicians who are said to represent their country. And never want to miss an opportunity of financial gain. Let's expose another version of it. The donation to the COVID-19 Solidarity Response Fund supports, quote, the World Health Organization's global efforts to combat the COVID-19 pandemic. And Facebook, another one, is matching the first $10 million donated. So each contribution goes further. Donations support efforts to track and understand the spread of the virus, to ensure patients get the care they need and frontline workers get essential supplies and information, and to accelerate efforts to develop vaccines, Israel, tests and treatments. We're all in this fight together. The COVID-19 Solidarity Response Fund is powered by the UN Foundation and the Swiss philanthropic foundation Rothschilds, all collected by the UN and based in New York. The jackasses just proved our show again, and we thank you for the validations. They're coming thick and fast now. It's another example. It's a bit like that child, the bullying child in Australia, of them collecting funds off the people to keep these clowns going. World Horror Organization, Facebook, UN, Rothschilds. Based in New York. Are you seeing the picture now? A Dutch national was charged in takedown of obscene websites that was selling over 2,000 real rape and child pornography videos, which was all funded by cryptocurrency. I told you it was connected in previous shows. And the Dutch national Michael R.M. Acker, Mr. Dark, was indicted by a federal grand jury in the District of Columbia for his operation of Dark Scandals, which is a site both on the Darknet and ClearNet, whatever that is, that featured violent rape videos and depictions of child pornography. The 9-count indictment was unsealed this week along with parallel civil forfeiture action, and the defendant was charged with various counts of distribution of child pornography, production and transportation of obscene matters for sale or distribution, engaging in the business of selling or transferring obscene matter, and laundering of monetary instruments. TikTok team pedos and your expanding band of criminals. I guess that stings. Or is it a sting? Last piece before the intel. Again, something to take note of. Mr. Trump on Saturday said he had the power to remove or demote Jerome Powell, the Federal Reserve chairperson, which renewed a long-running threat against the central bank's leader at a time when it could further upset volatile markets. Mr. Trump said in a news conference at the White House that ousting Mr. Powell was not his current plan, but that he was not happy with the Fed because it was following and we should be leading. Interesting comments. Not the only interesting comments this week from Mr. Trump, is it not? Intel. Erik Prince. Oh my. Another one connected to Team Pedo. Perhaps you'll realise why this is linked. Of Blackwater Academy and Z infamy, all mercenaries-based killing groups, is now under investigation for using ex-spies to infiltrate social media and other groups. So now you see, the mainstream media news, which was formerly THI News. We did warn about Erik Prince several times. Now, Project Veritas is one of those cited as the spies. Now, personally, I can reel off a number of other ex-spies or current agents within the alt-media circles operating against the people, but most will be familiar with certain names and groups by now, and no, I will not be doing a list. Any injections, people need to listen to this closely. Any injections of funds by the Fed, bonds by this or that organisation, is all fake news, no matter who says it, and I mean no matter who says it. Our show has proven time and time again to be right, in particular to financial ongoings, and I'm asking people to stop buying into it and blaming whoever for the problem. All of it is an illusion. Billions for this, trillions for that. Illusion. Until further notice. Now, the reason for this is this show has repeatedly warned of the financial takedown of this country. I don't think anyone can really doubt that anymore. And it's over-reliance on imports and a plethora of greed-based families and connections operating out of Chicago, California, San Francisco, Miami, Texas, and of course New York, who seem to have no end in their greed-based lifestyles or bank accounts. But as warned in the Clowns in Panic show, which I'm going to be repeating next week, there is a new level of greed game now, and this is part of what has been going on with this virus. That only the multi-billionaires can play in, all with 6 zeros in your account, and those with low 9-0 accounts will all get swallowed in their version of wheat and chaff. Don't believe me? Watch and see. On Monday, we're going to go in day order for the intel. We found out that the Rothschilds were blocking delivery of food and supplies to the American people and hoarding it below the main Walmart centres. Now, we worked together with a plan of how to fix that issue and ensure no further games on that level. The restocking of shelves is now underway, and in some cases more tomorrow being Tuesday. Other major things were headed off that was on top of Tank's report this week, which will be revealed in due course. Next item. The short show I did recently and made mention of issues facing America and imports, and I'm pleased to announce this will and has been addressed since. It is a national security issue. Now, there may be some short-term issues, but at least it is being addressed. Mr. Trump ordered the in-house stockpiling of oil, and that is a heads up and towards self-sufficiency. Where are we next? Let's leave that for now. No, it has to be played now. Yet again, it's involved in alt media, but it is the intel. You will understand more by the end of the show. Drake put out an official report of mass arrests this week. And yes, I know Wilcox started that under Art Aqua in 2002. And the mention of white hats, oh dear. They died in the Pentagon incident in 2001. But then he also gave away his own stance by declaring there will be martial law. Only a member of the Rothschilds or the Black Sun groups wanted martial law. Nobody else. Now, for a while I thought and wanted to believe he was naive, but at this juncture he is not. And the fact that it was presented as evidence on the Cobra site is now indicative. Cobra still peddling the event can't happen due to Toppler bombs. Do me a favour and turn it in, will you? If they exist and they don't, they could all be removed within a day of our time. And he's telling people that they're still around after nearly a decade of reporting it. One would like to ask, where is the proof of Toppler bombs? Because there is none. Positive military, where is the proof? There is none. White hats, there is none. Is it 2012 again? Now, according to Drake, America will go into quarantine on the 23rd for 3 weeks, not 2 weeks this time, and martial law will be declared, according to Drake. Now, what is going on now is there's an awful lot of misdirect in the alt media. Plans are being put out. this one is being arrested or executed, and a lot of non-personal responsibility. The virus used as a cloak for mass arrests. But I have one question for people to ponder on. What difference to your life does arresting Tom Hanks, Prince Andrew, Oprah or Ellen DeGeneres make? None. It's distraction. And what I'm seeing is there is zero evidence to support around 90+% of the claims being made currently on the alt media. Do I wish it was different? Absolutely. But we deal with fact here, not fiction. As for the mass arrests and the plans, do people really not think at all these days? Let's say it's all correct, all these plans people are putting out. Well, you've just ruined a whole plan that some people may have planned for weeks or months for. Not to mention put people's lives at risk. And for what? All for to get extra likes or traffic to your websites. It's irresponsible and beyond stupid and child thinking levels. And I will repeat again, this show will never reveal any plans or answer operational questions. Because if you know, they know, and any potential plans are laid to waste. Think different. So the reason I brought that piece up first, with Drake declaring martial law, or his group, or his intel, is martial law was planned to go into place on Monday. And it was averted by us in a strategic move. Both sides, the Rothschilds and the Black Sun, had tried to implement martial law on Americans on Monday. But then Kim pulled rank. As under martial law, the highest rank takes charge. And that is Kim. Martial law was then cancelled by both the Rothschilds and the Black Sun, as they realised that would have left Kim in charge of the whole country. But I guess no one told Drake they changed their plans. You just outed yourself, sir. You've just outed yourself. We had calls with the Pentagon on Monday. A lot went on Monday. And there was a number of others, high-profile departments, shall we say. They were all on the phone Monday, and I was there at the time. But the call with the Pentagon, they were left with in no uncertain terms, and were told that we knew that they had the coronavirus testing kits in their possession since December of last year. And they were told if they wanted funding by us to send them out now, and the tests would be given away for free. They were going to charge American people billions for them. So that failed. Further damage was done to the Rothschilds clan and the Black Sun groups that day, was already done, and further to follow. Still Monday. The whole narrative will change in the coming days as this whole virus thing linked in some part to adrenochrome and has backfired spectacularly. You're going to see it roll back. There was also other interesting things that were ongoing in the background on Monday, which we may reveal later. One of the other things we alerted the government to on Monday, and we put them on full alert, is the awareness via ports and airports of clowns bringing in the Novo virus to America. We're pleased to report that the authorities are taking the appropriate actions. So Monday, all in all, was a pleasing day for us and humanity. Not so if you are a clown. Also on Monday, a lead official from the Federal Reserve got rather pissy and called Kim the C word. No, not coronavirus, but the C-U-N-T. Now, chaps, don't be bad losers. Nice people. Also on Monday, Kim arranged a number of transfers for a number of different projects with the government and outside. And so now it's a case of wait and see who plays. Tuesday. The plans we put forward and working together with that was put forward on Monday of a stimulus plan of $1,000 per adult and $300 per child to overcome and offset some of the hardship created by this manufactured virus fear porn plan of the clowns. Other stimulus plans put forward by the Trust on Monday, which was implemented on Tuesday, is no payroll tax until the end of the year. More will follow. Wednesday, the transfers done on Monday, Kim had to pull all the funds back as the banks were blocking them despite approval from the government and also the CEO of a particular bank. All calls from government departments and other groups who panicked when Kim pulled it back on yesterday were subsequently ignored by Kim and the Trust. Part of this virus and the collapse of the markets was a hacker was siphoning money out of the markets, which we in part reported the last show. But Kim located all the accounts and pulled everything out of those accounts that the siphon money out of the markets was being transferred. And it is said that the Lee family and the Chinese government are now hunting those people down. Today, much of the restocking of shelves is now well underway. But if you are having difficulty obtaining certain items, particularly essentials, we're warning you to go early in the morning when it opens. People are getting in line very early and taking all the stock. And many of those issues will be resolved. Eventually it will all settle down again. We don't think it's going to be weeks or months. We're talking about days. The point is, a lot of this virus issue has already settled down. That's the real truth. And the real issue, which is being addressed heavily now, is the portal people or the mainstream media. They are the problem in all of this with their lies and fear porn, distraction-based scripts. They are being looked at. Message to the clowns. It's time, more so than minions really, it's time you all think long and hard where your allegiances lie. the non-paying Rothschilds or Black Sun groups, or prosper with the American people and subsequently the world. I personally, and this is my opinion only, am sick of hearing your pleas and whines and watching Kim arrange deals and projects and you all sit there and do nothing. Personally, if it was up to me, she should have ignored you all many months back. Do something constructive and beneficial for the people for once in your lives and show some backbone. Organise teams of who will actually take some action against the idiots blocking it. The longer it goes on, it is you that suffers. No funds equals no pay. Or you can wait another 13 pointless years of waiting for some fake RV. It's your choice. The trust can stay closed forever if it wants, until people do the right thing. And I'm tired of seeing Kim put all the effort in and it's all arranged, all the paperwork done, and you people sit there like clowns. Like I said, we can switch the phone off, but you can't. Also, the so-called patriots and militias. You do realise patriotism is a fancy name for fascism, don't you? If not, learn it. If you cannot see this country as being hijacked right in front of your face by now, you never will. And you can all carry on playing toy bloody soldiers and running around the woods shooting defenceless wildlife, or you can stand up and be counted for real. Go and help in your communities. Enough of this fake pomp and ceremony, worshipping all things war and military about the country, whilst getting teary-eyed over the stars and stripes, as that is what you are programmed to do. That has failed you all. Fact. The new way is you don't fight for your country. Your country per se has never done anything for you. Fight for your people. Not for Americans, but all people within their fake borders labelled as America. And no, the United States is not America, but a bloodline-based European system of harvesting this country, and has done since the 1600s, and every single day since July the 4th, 1776. Learn facts, not fiction, and stand up for your people. Hi all and welcome back. Fairly packed and varied intel there. But there was an awful lot done on Monday that prevented things, blocked their games, prevented them from starving the American people out. Not only are they trying to financially starve us, literally as well. And yes, it's disappointing that Kim had to pull the funds back again on Wednesday. But that's their loss. We can wait. Like I've said all along, time is on our side, not theirs. So if they want to just sit there in their offices clicking pens at all the government departments, one day they're going to realise there's no pay. And like I said, you can sit there and wait 13 years for an RV to happen, or you can prosper with the people. There's a lot more that went on. this week. And like Kim has said, there's only small portions of it ever get released. But there's a lot more progress going on than just the funds coming out or not. Eventually they'll have to. Eventually they'll have to back down. They have no options. But what it's also shown is how many in the alt media are now involved in their clown criminality program. And I find it sad, no matter who it is. But that's the way they operate. This op-ed piece is about an operative, and this will come up against, I imagine, in the coming months, when potential criminal cases and arrests may take place, and it will involve what went on in Iraq. But this operative within the British establishment was thrown under the bus for telling the truth back in 2003. And her name is Catherine Gunn, and this is part of her story of what went on. In November of 2003, she was charged with a breach of the Official Secrets Act in the UK. And her crime had been to reveal an email from the NSA to Britain's intelligence agency GCHQ, where she was working at that time. For those new, the NSA is a subsidiary group to the GCHQ is why. The lesser, not the lead, the lesser. It's a bit like the CIA. They're a subsidiary of the original OSS. Now, the email which arrived on the 31st of January 2003 specified a US operation to target the home and office communications of 6 foreign diplomats on the UN Security Council. And the purpose was to use the information gathered to strong-arm those states into voting for a resolution supporting an invasion of Iraq. She leaked the email via a contact, which then made its way to the Observer newspaper in the UK. She said, "I believe that this operation, using fake intelligence for the specific purpose of garnering votes to authorise a highly contested and deeply unpopular war against Iraq, was not only illegal, but also immoral." Now, 8 months later, she was charged and faced the prospect of a 2-year custodial sentence. She pled not guilty, and her defence team requested all the legal advice from the then Attorney General, Lord Goldsmith. They do get into those high positions, don't they? To the then British Prime Minister Tony Blair, or Tony Blair. And within a day of the defence team submitting that request, they don't like you asking questions back, the charges against her were dropped. National security, that word again. And in court, the prosecution stated that, quote, "there is no longer sufficient evidence for a realistic prospect of conviction," unquote, adding that it would not be appropriate to go into for the reasons for this decision. In other words, they're covering it up, because had they produced the evidence, it would have been of public interest, shall we say. Now, 16 years after that, the then prosecutor, Sir Ken MacDonald, claimed that the reasons they dropped it was for, quote, national security, unquote, reasons that the case was dropped. And in its own small way, this case illustrates the conflict and tensions around the issue of national security, which is all fake, as our members, regular members, will know. There is no national security at all. It's all about protecting these so-called intelligence groups and what they're doing. That's the sole reason that whole act came in 1948 or 49, just after the CIA was formed. And she said, I would argue that the Iraq war was not only against our national security, but has been a catastrophic for global security as a whole. In fact, Lord Goldsmith's own legal advice at the time, prior to him changing it, was that an invasion would be illegal. And the surveillance operation revealed by the NSA email was illegal also under the Geneva, Switzerland Convention. So that's protected under national security as well. It was in pursuit of an illegal war which has damaged our national security, and information about this issue is now classified. However, and the reason for this is to do with, yet again, national security. National security is another word to cover up lies of government and agencies, and is often used by the government and intelligence agencies to justify essentially what they do. But who defines what it is? What is the scope of it? And where are the checks and balances on it? Because that's something clearly amiss in both countries at the moment. It's just accepted without question as a legitimate concept, but the collective consequences of the previous 2 decades of invasions, bombings, rendition and torture, drone attacks, kill lists, massive surveillance, human rights violations, bulk data collection, storage, analysis and exploitation, it all paints a very dark picture. How one event changes everything. We spoke of this in the last show. Do these policies actually provide national security? Are they in the national interest? No. They're in the clown interest, that's it. And she said, looking back over the last 2 decades, my father's lament that we are in the age of insanity rings remarkably true. Many of the numerous, multifaceted, horrendous consequences of the invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq were predicted by peace activists, international relations experts, academics and also journalists. One was also raised by our intelligence services, which was the increased risk of terrorism within the UK as a result of that war. Well, go figure. You know, you're sitting there in your home in Pennsylvania, and then some Iraqi starts bombing your whole town or city. You're going to want to fight back. It's common sense or logic. And the argument that we invaded those countries essentially for reasons of national security rings hollow when looked at with 2020 vision, as does the same argument over the catastrophic bombing of Libya in 2011, which caused the collapse of another relatively stable and functioning country. The support of anti-Syrian government terrorists since 2013 and the unwavering support for Saudi Arabia against Yemen. All the same goons as why. And the current bellicose focus on Iran in an already chaotic and conflict-torn region tests the limits of sanity. Now, Britain's Official Secrets Act 1911 was rushed through Parliament in July 1911 following an hysterical pre-war environment without so much as a cough of protest. Sound familiar? And that act was drafted without including a specific public interest defence. For example, the ability for those accused to argue that the public interest in disclosing the information would outweigh the reasons for not disclosing it. So the British Official Secrets Act, like the National Security Act, all pushed through without question or involvement by a number of the politicians. Patriot Act the same. No one ready. And this is what they do. Or what they used to do. Not so much now. Too many people watching now. Where are we next? Mexico. Another in part proof of from Russia with love. But there was a report that came out and a demonstration after shocking femicide statistics have prompted a furious reaction from women's rights groups in Mexico, and anger over the violence is a key part of a one-day national women's strike which took place in the country last week. Now they are claiming that women are being murdered at a rate of 8,000 in just under 2 years, and the latest strike was prompted after a girl was found dead and the suspects were covered in mud and blood and were just let go by the corrupt authorities. This maltreatment of women has to stop globally. It just has to. But in particular, Mexico, other Central and South American countries, along with India and the countries in between all the way to Egypt. It is beyond disgusting, and it seems the infection that came out of India and the Kali Ma was brought to and taught to most, if not all, native tribes globally. It lives on today with ritual-based sacrifices, demeaning and hierarchical-based caste systems. All who operate those levels of control are all weak. Like I said earlier, controlling others is not a strength. That is the illusion. You are weak and feeble-minded. The Muslims in particular, I defend them a lot on this show, which some people don't like, and I don't particularly care. I'll call it for what it is. But what I will not defend the Muslims on is their ill treatment of women as well. I will not question them on the fake jihadists. They were all bought and paid actors of Langley. Period. But their maltreatment of their women as well. But then you remember Muslim and Islam came out of the Christian church. The same church that decided that the mother and the female didn't exist. So there's your answer as to why. We mentioned India and Pakistan before, and for more than 70 years now, just after Roswell, India and Pakistan have waged sporadic and fairly deadly skirmishes over control of the mountainous region of Kashmir. We are both travellers of time and space. Yes, indeed. And it's cost tens of thousands of lives in the conflict, including 3 just this month that we referenced in the news. Now, both sides are claiming that this Himalayan outpost is their own. But what has occurred recently, web surfers in India could be forgiven for thinking that the dispute is all but settled, as the borders on Google's online maps all display Kashmir as fully under Indian control. Elsewhere, users see the region's snaking outlines as a dotted line, which then acknowledges the dispute that's been ongoing. Now, Google's corporate mission is to organise the world's information, it is said, but it also bends to its will. From Argentina to the United Kingdom to Iran, the world's borders look different depending on where you are viewing them from. And that's because Google and other online map makers simply change them. Now, personally, myself, I've witnessed GoOgle changing maps, particularly when you view off-limit areas like, say, Antarctica. I was viewing a whole village in Antarctica with some very strange symbols that had been carved into the land, mining pipes going into water holes or mini lakes, and the next day the whole village was gone. And there have been several other of those incidents, and has in the past had little to do with either it belongs to India or Pakistan. It's nothing to do with that. And everything to do with drug trading by the Five Eyes groups and the Falcon Trust. It's littered with poppy fields. Oops. But that region is a key off-world base as well. That was guarded not by India or Pakistan, but Chinese military. Personally, I don't think those guards were Chinese at all. I kept getting asked to cover this particular topic, and eventually I've got round to it. Another sick practice, I have to say. And where they hold ceremonies, and whether this particular, what they call him, Mohel, whether he performed the controversial rite Metzitza Bepe, which means oral suction, also known as MBP, in which a ritual circumciser, which I will call better known as a pedophile, places his mouth on the baby's genitals to suction blood from the circumcision wound. And when asked, Cohen, always Cohen, isn't it, smiled and said, "I did what I had to do." But if Cohen performed MBP without getting written consent from the infant's parents, he broke the law. Except, as we know too well now, those that follow this cult think they are above the law, a bit like Epstein. And he said it's something he has done many times before. And for more than a year, ritual circumcisers known as mohels have been required to obtain written consent from parents before performing MBP. Now, no surprise, the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, should be better known as the UN, instituted the regulation in the fall of 2012 after a number of babies contracted herpes following this MBP BP practice. Now, for Jews, male circumcision is mandatory. Why? Because it was prescribed in the Torah. Oh dear. And in the book of Genesis, it is described as the mark of the covenant between God and the descendants of Abraham. And the quote from there, it says, "Throughout all generations, every male shall be circumcised when he is 8 days old. This shall be my covenant," which means to bind, "in your flesh, an eternal covenant." It went on. This is in Genesis. "The uncircumcised male whose foreskin has not been circumcised shall have," quote, "his soul cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant," unquote. Oh dear. So let's get this right, shall we? God made everything in 6 days. Day 7 was a day of rest, and then on the 8th day of his new creation, a baby boy, he asks pedophiles to bite off the foreskin of the chosen people. Does any rational person not see the sheer lunacy of this? And if you don't do what God says, he will cut your soul from your flesh if you don't get circumcised. Really? Does anyone ask this God, if he's so great and can do everything, why didn't he create man with a foreskin to begin with? If it needs cutting or biting off. I mean, come on, people. What utter shit is that? All wear skull caps now, and let's all kiss a wall of sandstone with hidden jinns inside of it. I'm asking people to go and try this themselves. Go up to your local police station or hospital and spend all day with a silly hat on and kiss the wall all day and see what happens to you. And please send me a text from your local jail or mental institute, will you, and let me know how you got on. In Leviticus, God spoke to Moses. We all know who Moses is now, one of them, not one of us, telling him to speak to the Israelites. When a woman conceives and gives birth to a boy, on the 8th day the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised. So God, who has a whole universe to look after, and his sole focus of attention is circumcising a male child on one planet. Does that sound logical to you? Now, biblically, the infant's father, Avi Haben, is commanded to perform the circumcision himself. However, most fathers are not comfortable or do not have the training, and so they designate a mohel. M-O-H-E-L. Now, apparently, these mohels are specially trained in circumcision and the rituals surrounding the procedure. Rituals. And many molahim are doctors or rabbis, and some are both, or cantors, and are required to receive appropriate training both from the religious and medical fields. Now, traditionally, the mohel uses a scalpel to circumcise the newborn. Today, doctors and some non-orthodox mohelim use a perforating clamp before they cut the skin. According to them, the clamp makes it easier to be precise and shortens recovery time. Now, Orthodox mohelim have rejected perforating clamps, arguing that by crushing and killing the skin, it causes a great amount of unnecessary pain to the newborn, cutting off the blood flow completely, which according to Jewish law is dangerous to the child and strictly forbidden, and also renders the olah, foreskin, as cut prior to the proper ritual cut. So they can't even agree on what's the right way to do it, even with religious and medical help. Under Jewish law, a mohel must draw blood from the circumcision wound. Must. What this is telling you is this is a blood sacrifice to the gods again. Now, most mohels do it by hand with a suction device, but some follow the traditional practice of doing it by mouth. I'm sorry, that is pedophilia. There is no excuses. No, well, this is the way. No. There is, if you're going to do it, there's ways of doing it, not by mouth. That is pedophilia, top and bottom. These people are not mohels, they're pedophiles. And here's the kicker. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention issued a warning in 2012 about the health implications of the latter practice, citing 11 cases of neonatal herpes simplex virus, HSV, and 2 recorded fatalities. In 2013, a review of cases of neonatal HSV infections in Israel identified ritual circumcision as the source of HSV-1 transmission in 32% of the cases. Hi all and welcome back. Oh dear, that last piece. It's sickening. And people just go along with it. You know, I was reliably informed that most Americans have gone along with it. Just stupid. Why are you defacing your child and running the risk of death or serious illness for a child 8 days old? To follow basically what is a cult of Ra Egyptian practice. Not to do with your God and all that rubbish. It's them clans out of Egypt and India again. That's where circumcision started. And in Egypt they do female circumcision. But does anybody ask why God gave you that skin or flaps? God created everything. Why did he create an imperfection? Well, clearly never, and these people are just psychopathic pedophiles. That's the top and bottom line. And it needs to be stopped. And it's up to Americans to stop following a fake country's religious ritual. Because that's all it is. There's no evidence that it makes it cleaner or anything like that. In fact, the sensitivity is destroyed in most. Unbelievable. These next few pieces, some of them cover what has been going on in the alt media, but it gives us an opportunity to look at things in a different way, in a psychological way, and how you would think different. Are we thinking different? Would you go a different way or a better way? But there's a lot of erratic behaviour, edginess, people getting testy and irritable since the turn of the year, all of which we warned about, and yet some predictably, for humans that is, choose to ignore those warnings and wait until the proverbial hits the fan. But the question is, why do we do that? That is what is known as reactionary behaviour. It's not proactive. And people in reactionary mode always make mistakes. Why? Because of time. Back to part 1 of ones and zeros again. Because time creates pressure, and pressure leads to stress and the subsequent errors of judgment. But why is it things inside of us are allowed to be ignored? People go, oh, I'll wait, there's plenty of time to address their inner issues, when everything in the external world, no time is allowed for anything. It's contradictory. People won't wait a few minutes in line. I mean, we've all seen some of the behaviour of the bot masses, pushing old ladies over to get the supplies out of the superstores. And they're always asking, when is this or that arriving? And they must rush to get here and to get there and get everywhere. People driving about like lunatics to save time. But the question is, what are you saving time for? Are you banking time? Fine, if you are, but what use are you putting that extra time aside for? It's like people asking me or Kim, when are the funds arriving? It's taken too long. Fine, okay. But have you considered your soul asking you the same thing? When is your personal development going to arrive? Oops. And people may say, don't be saying that, Thomas, that's not fair. Really? Well, actually demanding or requesting when is the money coming repeatedly is actually not fair on Kim, is it? Essentially what's going on is the two of us are taking on a global army of hackers for no pay. And winning, I might add. And yet still driving on each day to help the all. And this is where a lack of thinking and understanding comes in. Inner and outer thinking. And people make so many demands of others, yet make none of themselves. When is Thomas going to do or fix this? But if I asked you, when are you going to fix your inner and shadow work? Or when are you going to fix your THI state and country groups? All hell breaks loose. Why is that? And it's a lack of perspective and thinking. Thinking brings deeper understanding, more knowledge and more wisdom. Why wouldn't everyone want those abilities? Well, for some, ignorance of the self and others is bliss, as it leaves the door open to always blame somebody else for their problems, and it ends up being a convenient cop-out. But too many are dying on the inside at this time. They failed themselves and will continue to project their own failures in life onto others who have. But that then sends them deeper into the mire and the pit. And it's like governments. Why is your government corrupt, a joke, idle or incompetent? Because too many of the people within that country are the same trait is why. Look around you. Are we the people really that different as portrayed? No. People complain of the Patriot Act and the fact that many signed it for it without reading it, and yet people sign up for credit cards, loans and mortgages and don't read them either. It's the same thing. And people sign up for apps and don't read the terms, where they gain access to your emails, contact lists, all your texts, all your calls and all your pictures, just to sign up for the fear porn based weather channel. Really? So you see, we're not that different. And the conclusion is, it is we who are the problem. You as an individual and we as a collective. And it's up to all of us to correct that. Myself included, I'm no different. We all have to improve about how we go about things. The second piece I need to cover in this section is the Saviour programme, often bandied about. And it was mentioned recently by Shane, Randy, Chloe and others that I've been deemed as running a Saviour-based programme on the listeners and members. So, in fairness, let's be transparent here again and look to see whether their accusations have any merit. And here are some of the meanings of the word, and basically we're checking to see whether it is in any way a slight or is derogatory in the way that they described. 1. A person who saves someone from danger or harm. 2. One who saves from any form or degree of evil. Or 3. A saviour is a person who saves someone or something from danger, ruin or defeat. So one must ask the question, is saving someone from harm, evil or danger a negative thing to do? Of course, then you have the other side of the word saviour. And predictably it brings in the mind-controlled, religiosity-based programme. And all of a sudden, the whole complex of that word, meaning and intentions changes. And as the From Russia with Love series has shown, so many of our words are church-based, and so many have hidden, devious meanings and also intentions. So to be accused of being a saviour means it is an external programme being ran. But the church in their word magic brings in that low level of thinking and connotations into it. And the irony is staggering. Now the saviour in their world is Jesus, which is odd in and of itself, given that there's already about 60 claiming to be a reincarnation of Jesus that we know of, including one in the hate and anger based group. But this then brings in the comparative mindset and the inferiority complex, because they are really suggesting I'm acting like a version of Jesus. But is that a slight or derogatory that I may act like that? Is it not really the case? What they are actually saying is they are not. And because they are not, they target the few who do wish to not be Jesus, but act like it. That's where the comparative mind kicks in. Now, personally, I have no desire to be anyone other than me, and I wish more were like that, comfortable in their own skin, and this is what THI is teaching in many ways, and not the desire to be something or someone outside of themselves. Our show does teach you that, if you listen without prejudice or preconceived notions. But we have another problem here. We have millions of people around the world asking for the return of Jesus. And these people are basically saying, I'm running a Jesus-based saviour program. Does that sound rational? But is what has happened to me going to happen to Jesus should he ever return? Whereby you are trashed, lied about, discredited, and have hate, envy and anger thrown at you, because you are teaching people to be better versions of themselves. People, in essence, asking for a return of Jesus are looking for another person to save them from themselves. Someone else to point fingers at when nothing changes. And the answer is nothing will change, because you haven't changed you. And what these people are really suggesting is, if the Saviour Jesus returns, they will pillory him and make accusations at him in the same way that people did allegedly 2,000 years ago, is it not? Because that's what they do to saviours. And basically, again, they're saying, we will not believe in you, Jesus, because you are running a saviour program. Stated in the same derogatory way it was used against me. But Jesus will not save anyone. Because to be saved, you have to let everything go and work on the self. But people hold on to their inner and shadow work and programming for dear life, and then project it at others. And no one, not even Jesus, Mary, Radomir, Allah, Yahweh, Anu or Source can save you from that dis-ease. So given that I'm not religious in any way, shape or form, clearly the latter saviour program does not apply to me. As for the former meanings, I will accept that and be charged as guilty of protecting people from harm, danger and evil. And so that, in essence, to me is a compliment. But some in contradictory and non-thinking patterns, that will always be used as a slight until they change, not me. Next piece. What is loyalty? A very rare trait nowadays sadly within society. And this brings in the same as the last. It's the comparative and competitive mindsets aligned with personal insecurities that renders this admirable trait into the same realms as myth. And this is what we can change, all of us. I know for me personally, this trait has almost become a lost trait, and I have suffered greatly in many ways at people's lack of not so much loyalty, but a basic lack of human consciousness, compassion and conviction of their own words. And I'm sure all who are listening to this have gone through the same thing. Well, I know you have. Whereby you can go out of your way to support or help people and not asking for anything in return, but a little support back when needed is not much to ask, is it? One would think. But sadly, one would be wrong to think that, it seems. Is that the first opportunity to test people's gratitude for helping people is rendered mute as they jump ship at the first sight of trouble and leave their friends and helpers floundering in a plethora of contradictory words of speaking of consciousness and pure love with source, whilst throwing people who cared for them under the bus. I'm sorry, but that's not how it's supposed to work. How people can express their eternal gratitude for a person 1 minute or for a few years, and then the next call that same person out as some sort of devil incarnate is both bizarre and erratic in equal measures. You would think that person had murdered someone, or they find out that he or she was a pedophile or some other heinous crime. But that's not the case. Someone feeds the lie, that plays into their own personal insecurities and failures, and off people go in a snap judgment not based in the reality of the current situation, and blindly and happily follow the lie. We cannot carry on doing that to each other. Where 1 minute you can go from being the father I never had to some evil demon type character, all in the space of 1 week. Is that self-mastery? Is that being in control of yourself? Is that being in balance? Clearly not. Now, one person this week said, I don't take criticism too well. Fine. But there's criticism, and there's volumes of criticism on a daily basis. But that same person who made that critique runs at the sight of trouble and leaves others to carry the can. Trouble often caused by his misleading doublespeak and open-ended comments to begin with. You know, many people have disagreed with the content or stance I have in the shows, and most times I've responded in a dignified way. But this is not criticism they're making, but made-up allegations that are essentially unfounded attacks. There is a big difference. And loyalty is lacking. And I'm not talking about blind loyalty here, as that can be even more damaging. As the German youth found out to their cost in World War II, and the Americans to their cost since, via patriotism. It's the same thing. It's a fancy word for fascism. As that then leads to ignoring the issues and not facing up to the reality on key points or topics. But what I'm talking about here is basic common decency and courtesy here. Our planet will never thrive with people acting and being disloyal to one another. It just won't. You cannot build communities and harmony without some degree of loyalty to one another. So people can talk all the flowery new age words of love, consciousness and the all, but clearly they're just talking and not walking the walk. And that level of fakery will be exposed badly now and in the future. The title of our show was specifically picked for that reason. All three words, like loyalty, are in short supply on this planet, and it has to be corrected. And we can go on making excuses that it's someone else's fault and blame this group and that group as the reasons behind it, all of which has failed, as those traits are still in very short supply. But the key reason is that it's in short supply is down to us. Not them, not clowns or governments. Us. We have allowed it. And us to become disloyal, which creates division. And so when something happens that needs addressing by us, no one is around to support us. Unlike the old ode, and I've slightly altered it, first they came for the Rus, and because I wasn't Rus, so I ignored it. And once you've gone through all the other labels and ignored it, what do you have left? Just you. Why? Because you ignored everyone else, and it created a pattern, and people followed the pattern of behaviour. Who lost that pattern and trait? We did. Social media, as you all know, is riddled with this type of snap and twisted judgments, and we in THI know it all too well. And because I am defensive of our group and associates connected to the alt media, this leaves me vulnerable in some ways, as you pay heavily for being loyal and protecting friends and others on this planet. A lot of our issues in our own group in the past 12 months have involved people from outside of our group who have come into our group and caused issues. In fact, the truth be known, a lot of it involved attacks on Randy Morgans, of all people, by a plethora of people, including some in his own group. We've had some of the followers of Shane, Randy's, Tanks, Jespers, Tia Joyce, Danny and Dawn. In fact, 3 of those 4 just named caused issues more against Randy Morgans than THI. But their followers have all come in and caused division within our group. And yet not one of those names went to any lengths to defend THI. Some made out they did publicly and then sold us down a river in a plethora of flip-flopping and misdirect, all reminiscent of American politics and mainstream media rhetoric. But loyalty, when done properly, defines a person of whom what they are, because exhibiting disloyalty is an abandonment of the self. What goes around comes around in so many ways. Disloyalty is an abandonment of others and is a service to self-protection shield for those not acting with integrity, who disregard people like they're throwing out the trash, yet fail to see the symbolic nature behind it. They are trashing themselves. Truth-telling in this world renders you a target of hate. Honour amongst men is rendered almost obsolete as the comparative mindset and latent insecurities amongst the population renders that mute as well. Integrity also. But integrity requires an element of loyalty to people, a cause or a plight. And sadly for many now, those three show traits are also consigned into myths or remnants of the past. But rest assured, your loyalty, your truth, your honour and your integrity is being assessed now by your highest judge. Will you feed it, or will you feed the replica source AI with flowery new age bullshit words that are not backed by your actions and continue to feed the beast? As always, that is for you to decide, not me. Your choice, your decision, and your path. Final piece before we go into a music break, which runs through a similar theme. Why is it so difficult to help people on this planet? It's the same thing that comes up again. We live in a world where we live lives in a constant competitive and comparative state. It's that same thing over and over again. Where people doing good things for others is seen as a bad reflection of them because they are not or not doing enough. But who said it was a competition? Nobody. And it is an inner turmoil that we all have to overcome. And it's one of the things I changed about myself near 20 years ago. If I'm envious of another for what they have or what they've achieved or done, I vowed that I must work harder on myself to achieve the object or status of envy. Not drag that person down to my level, as that is an all-lose type game, which has served the control system very well. And we have to change that on a personal level to break the system's hold over us. That's getting rid of the programming. But one of the biggest aspects is people lack intelligence. In a world of short sentences, Twitter inputs, doublespeak, people have by and large lost the ability to form a coherent sentence with words that match the intentions and the thought forms. And for a few examples, it's now being reported in the media that because of the coronavirus, the sales of Corona beer has dropped considerably and profits have dropped accordingly. And whilst that may have some amusing value, it highlights a growing lack of basic intelligence, and we have a long road back into correcting that. Where because a virus has the same name as a beer, I'm going to stop buying it. Oh dear. And we've had other examples closer to home recently in the group, whereby a person is alleged to be a scammer and is now also classed as a saviour program. Again, does that make any sense whatsoever? No. It's banal thinking patterns and also contradictory in the extreme. But these same people also declared someone else a homeless person and then say they are scamming lots of money. Again, how do those two allegations match up? They don't. and it actually looks retarded. Then we have a plethora of the same group, contradictory statements. Kim's ditched Thomas. Thomas ditched Kim. Kim has gone missing. Kim is dead. Thomas is sleeping with Kim. No, Thomas has killed Kim. Kim is a man. Kim is an AI. Then we go back to Thomas is sleeping with Kim. Then David Raya said in several emails, Thomas is smart, but then Thomas is stupid. And then Thomas has every negative label under the sun. It's utter bizarre. And that is a micro to the macro. It's the same thing. Do politicians make any sense? Do the media make any sense? No. It's no different. And this whole concept of people not thinking is bizarre in the extreme. But society has had it brainwashed out of them as all now just follow scripts. That's the problem. Be it from school, government, media, social media, memes, the military and the church. Repeat after me. And even the 5G subliminals to buy toilet paper for source sake, and yet many went along with it. It's they live on steroids. Obey, must buy toilet paper, and all idiots run out and buy it. And this is why the From Russia with Love series is so popular, and also has had such a big effect, and why people have got so much out of it. So why is it so popular? Because unlike the aforementioned entities, it is an interactive learning school is why. Oh my God, here's someone teaching us, asking us how to think, ponder or answer questions posed back. But that is how people learn. You're not going to learn by making statements with no proof. It's just a script. And your homework is for you to research. It's not compulsory. As many of the points that are made in the shows as possible. And many of you have, and the number of posts on Facebook or MeWe, plus the mainstream media now validating the information put out into our show, is now at staggering levels. And this is why these clowns, who people may think is a low-level alt-media tiff, no, it's not. I'm sad to say. They were sent by the higher-up people to play games. Think and act different is not just a meme. It is a way of life. A new way of operating for and by the people. We'll be back shortly. Hi all, welcome back to the final piece of tonight's show. I was just reading some of the chat comments and some feeling a bit guilty of to do with the circumcision story. But the problem is the people were educated to it, not taught. Teaching is showing you both sides and all angles. Educating is giving you a script that this is good for you and you must follow. Going forward, this is the whole point of why I do this show, is that we learn these lessons that failed us in the past and strive to improve them and change them into a better way for the future. Ignorance going forward is a choice. In the past, you were educated to believe what they told you. Not no more. Not with this show anyway. teaching you is different. The people that have found out from this show, however many years ago when you had your sons, would you have done it differently? Probably. It's the same with the possession, is it not? Be it drugs and alcohol. Would you have done it differently if you were taught on it, the dangers? The same applies to ayahuasca and peyote. Would you have made a different choice? Well, everyone's different. But at least by teaching of it, you are given then that choice. You are aware of the dangers and not just told, this is good for you and you must follow. That's why we do this show. And that's why a lot of these clans don't like it. It's teaching people a different way. The old ways, as I keep saying, failed every single one of us. Even the so-called educated elites can't come up with a plan. Despite all their vast wealth and infrastructure, and can't come up with a plan. Why? Stupid. And that goes back to the earlier piece mentioning of a lack of intelligence on this planet, and it is a national security incident for the planet, because unless we are taught the new ways, we're always going to be looking for parents to look after us. And that is why I set up the CHI state groups. Like I said, you may think it's about the money. It's not. This is a teaching program. It's the top and bottom line. Final piece tonight is, we've spoken in length about the two worlds existing side by side, and it has many levels of operating and understanding, not just one. Their world and our world on a base level is about how people act, think and be. And the differences now are marked. You can all see it. Even some of the masses are waking up slowly to that. And on this level, the two worlds can be seen as awake and unawake. But most are not aware of the other levels of being awake and what they are, and subsequently hit a glass ceiling. There's a lot of the QAnon followers who have hit a glass ceiling. I've been watching them. There's no development of the narrative. It's just this one's a bad guy and this one's a bad guy and this one's a bad guy. And this one needs to be arrested and this one needs to be arrested. But none of them are asking the question, and what happens next? Crickets. Now the sleepers will feel, and in fact many of the awake people will feel, that they have taken the easy way out of just ignoring things. So people have two choices: to learn the hard or the easy way in life. And too many, particularly the sleepers, think they chose the easy way. Oops. Time will show, and they will find out they never. And it will be brutal, the new learning for those people. It will be brutal. Our members will be aware of the several extra levels of awakening. Unlearning is the lowest level. although possibly the greatest leap also. But like time, it moves on, and so should we. Now, the other two worlds level is the frequency wave. Our organic world has a frequency level. It starts at the bottom and goes up in a wave motion. The inorganic, instead of starting a wave pointing and going upwards, it starts on a downward wave motion and then intersects with our world. And this, in essence, is the inorganic world. And also an overlay world that resembles holographic. And then we have the physical and non-physical worlds. Some say operating not side by side, but on top of each other. Just like the planes, the dimensional planes, soul development planes, same thing. And also like the old descriptions of the 9 worlds realm with Midgard in the centre. How do they interact? Well, everything interacts with everything else at some point in time, as all is connected. But like the brain, sometimes you remember and sometimes you don't. It's the same principle. You're stepping in and out. There are questions that remain to be answered. Is it time-based, where past, present and future all intersect? Or is it space-based theme whereby magnetic forces come into play? Like galaxies, some are moving away and some are attracted to each other. And this applies to people also. More so now than at any other point in time or your life. You are drawn to people in mysterious ways, but recent events have seen you draw away from more and more people than being attracted to. And this is frequency-based magnetism at work. Those in the higher frequency, of which there are a few, sadly, it is improving, will congregate with each other and interact. Now, some of you thought certain people or yourself were of a higher based frequency. But that was due to their acting abilities. And they will and have fallen away. Mask-created acting abilities is no longer an option in this field of interactivity, which is why you're seeing certain ones fall away. And yet people are often surprised how some fall or do a 180 on their narrative. Flip-flopping in opinions is more aspects based in lies than the truth is why. But changing opinions is not the issue here. Because as new information comes in and you operate in a fluid truth system, opinions are always going to change. The key is, do those opinions change because of an agenda? Those in the alt media who have flipped recently have to answer that question themselves. What this is really all about is people changing the whole character and going off in a bad way. But as the bar gets higher on the frequency level, many will get left below it. Evidence of which is now prevalent all around you. And this is why I said back in November of 2017, it's too late now for people to start to learn. They will never catch up. Because them catching up means we have stood still. and I have no intentions of standing still with this show. And our shows and information since that time have reflected that. It's gone on to a completely new level. And they're your words, not mine. But climbing the right-hand path is not for those who sit on fences, flip-floppers and actors, because it's all too easy to fall into the trap and subsequently fall. It requires a full-on commitment, ignoring the naysayers, the doubt merchants, along with the envious and bitter-based people. The focus is you and your path, not theirs. Two worlds can also be described as service to self and service to others, the latter of which brings far more beneficial aspects to you in alignment with your inner and shadow work. But it also brings elevated soul growth, which then leads to a greater understanding of life and all its components. And it also leads to the possibility of your so-called junk DNA being switched on as well. Service to others carries a frequency, and providing you are 51% service to others, the benefits garnered far outweigh pieces of paper with numbers on them. It's not even funny. Or close. And with this system, and many participating in it, it means it all comes back to you as well. Not that you should give in expectance to receive back. That is not how service to others work. Expecting something back is service to self. But the cycle of motion of service to others goes in a clockwise motion, and so all on the wheel will be touched and received the frequency that gives off. The previous mode of operations all went to the takers and the service to self, and it went in an anti-clockwise motion, and so became a harvesting system, and overfed the greed merchants in life. Now, for further examples of this, check out the sun wheel symbol that was overlaid with the swastika by the Zionist sub-grey elements, not Germans. The ancient way, it went in a clockwise motion. The new way, with the swastika that they took over, went anti-clockwise. And for many of the service to self who went along with this program, and everything was okay, but eventually learned that they themselves ended up being harvested as well. As greed brings more greed and ultimately ends up in a mad for power type game, which is for the psychotic elements within our society. Become more greedy, less empathic and more psychotic, you stay in that game. But the game ultimately turns on you as well, as the clans of our society and bloodline families have found out to their cost. But there's another element of the two worlds that brings in whether you can see or not. Was the reason for this piece. That plays into the whole ET disclosure realm. But the focus of this piece is not necessarily about them, but may have implications within it. And this is about islands appearing and then going missing. islands appearing on maps from the 1400s up to the late 1800s that suddenly are no longer there. So what is creating this phenomena? We had Sandy Island in the South Pacific. The Antilles was in the middle of the Atlantic. High Brazil was off the west coast of Ireland and was said to be home of the Irish gods. Friesland, somewhere north of Britain and Iceland, all have just vanished. And some will say, well, they sank, with the floods and that, except deep sea divers have been underneath all 4 of those regions I've just mentioned, and there is no evidence they existed. None. Particularly the Sandy Island one, because there was a recent expedition of it. And this brings in the 2 worlds again, an overlay of the planes, where one of the planes dipped into certain portions of the planet and essentially moved these islands into a higher or lower based frequency, whereby they are now not observed. What if the dimensional planes dip in and out of our reality? We just call them anomalies, glitches, or a coincidence, or suggest other excuses by doubting ourselves. I've not had enough sleep, I've had too much to drink, or I've had a memory blank. But these are real events. There was an event in the outback of Australia that was reported to me about a World War II Nazi base appearing and then disappearing within a short amount of time. What if those islands were from another dimension and were placed there by other entities as a base of operation here? And when a certain mission is complete or they were discovered, the island went back into the portal and back to where it came from. And the great question to ask about that last bit is Easter Island a remnant from somewhere else? We have strange events like the Olympic sinking, not the Titanic, it was the Olympic. The fact that there was an iceberg at all in the warmer waters of the Gulf Stream in April, not the middle of winter, the middle of April, suggests something was amiss. For an iceberg to bring a liner down of that size, almost adjacent to New York in April, raises more questions than answers, and could possibly bring in another aspect of this, of time manipulation. What if these islands went up, not down? They are still there, but are suspended, just like the islands in the Avatar movie. There is a reason people globally came out of that movie with deep emotions and really upset and crying. Past memories was flooding through is why. But is there other anecdotal evidence that these islands went up and not down? Well, there was an incident off the west coast of Africa where fishing trawlers spotted an island hovering above the water and called out the military. The US military sent warships out, and as the story was related, they were able to sail their ships underneath the whole island. And anyone who's familiar with the Philadelphia experiment will understand that a lot better. And then we have the other story of one version, not the version, one version of Atlantis. It was not an island of fixed land, but it was actually a large craft that came and left. Which begs the question, what if these islands were actually remodeled craft or cloaked craft looking like islands? Sadly, most people will think that type of technology is way in the future. Reality is all technology is old and from way in the past. Understanding that as a fact makes working stuff out, what they are and have done to us, make much more sense. So the question is it time manipulations, floating islands, or disappearing to a higher or lower frequency? And I'm going to leave you all to ponder on it. This has been the Truth, Honour and Integrity Show. My name's Thomas Williams. Bye for now. Don't forget the American and Canadian people, Saturday afternoon, the Zoom, just for the American and Canadian people, please. You don't want to overload it. All together now.